and even a couple of notes about the Cowboys. Brian Davis covers Texas, Austin American-Statesman, joined us many different times on this show. And Brian, again, thanks for your time with Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina, and David Smoak. So, sometimes whatever is reported when it comes to the University of Texas football team can get blown out of proportion or completely like whatever. So what actually about Moro Ojomo, was this a good thing that this kind of came out and they've got to be able to get to it and move on from it?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on, guys. I love being on here. You rattled off all those Baylor players that are going to, be in NFL draft types, and I'm like, that conversation won't be so long with Texas players, that's for sure. Hey now, look out. Listen, here's what happened in a nutshell. All right, last Thursday, we get to talk with Ojomo, a kid from Katy, one of the most highly intelligent football players that has ever come down the pipe. In my opinion, an extremely smart guy. And an extremely good talker, and not somebody who talks to hear himself talk, or he's trying to be showy for reporters. He's never like that, never. And so, at the beginning of spring football, Sarkisian was asked, do you have more guys buying in this season to your culture than last year? And he says, well, I think we do, but you should go ask the players. Okay, so we will. Moro, what do you think about this team's culture? And he says, well, I think we've got some 18 to 21-year-olds who are more interested in chasing women, chasing money, and chasing alcohol than they are of winning, right? And the thing about it is, this was talked about last Thursday. When I heard it last Thursday, I thought, well, that's really interesting. But I'm like, I'll just save that for my spring wrap-up. I didn't think this something I needed to run to my keyboard and pound out, right? But when Sarkisian was asked about it today, he kind of takes the guy to the woodshed and basically says, we shouldn't. He should not have said that. Thought it was handled poorly. I thought the forum was poor. You keep matters in house. You need to kind of mow your own lawn before you talk about someone else's lawn, so to speak. And it's now kind of a big thing, especially for Sark to say, you guys won't be talking to him for a while, right? So it's rare that a coach would say, go talk to the players. Okay, well, we did, and he didn't like the answer. Is really what it is. And so to me, on the Richter scale of Texas sports stories, this is about a 2 or 3, in terms of just a one-day, 24-hour dust up. When you compare this to Monkeygate and coaches on buses banging the buses and everything else that's going on here in the last 365 days, this is pretty low level stuff.
But the coach on the bus did coach this guy's position. So has he maybe filled up some of that propaganda that he's getting in the position room? Maybe. Okay, all right. Okay, but here's my thing though. Propaganda. That gets me triggered as a laugh. But here's the thing about that. Both Bo Davis on the bus, Moro Ojomo, Keandre Coburn, all these guys, they're simply tired of losing. They're just tired of the mediocrity. And, I think that's what is so frustrating to everyone here is that, how many 5-stars and 4-stars does it take to be competitive with Baylor? How many 5-stars do they need to beat TCU? How many 5-stars do they need to beat Iowa State? I don't know. But these are the questions. How many 5-stars does it take to beat Kansas? That's the question that Texas is asking itself because they're so tired of mediocrity. I think about this, guys. This will really put it in perspective for you. The class of 2023, okay? Some of the recruits of the class of 2023. Now, maybe not all of them, but definitely some of them. Some of these recruits were not even alive when Vince Young scored on 4th and 5. Okay? Some of them weren't even alive when Texas had its high water moment of this century, right? That's literally how long it has been since this school has achieved greatness. And, and I think that's where the frustration of everything it bubbles up from. I mean, over the last, I don't know, ever since the fifth play of the Alabama game in 2009 when Colt McCoy's shoulder was knocked out of whack, what's happened? They had one big night in New Orleans when Georgia decided not to show up, right? That's really it, Since along the way, we've had Mac Brown throwing the coaching staff under the bus against Iowa State. They've had Charlie. Charlie's team couldn't even get the coin flip right against UCLA. They've had up and down moments against Oklahoma. What else jumps to mind? A loss to Kansas at Kansas got Charlie Strong fired. Another loss last year to Sark, a game they could have very easily won, but Sark, made the quarterback decision late. Hudson Card, 2 turnovers. That's fueled that. I mean, it's just on and on and on it goes. And until somebody, enough people step up and say enough with this, it's just going to keep going.
So in that way, Brian, even if it was the wrong form or whatever, do you think this will be productive, this getting out and maybe having a spotlight shined on it, or do you think it's actually something that could backfire on Sarkisian?
I think it's very delicate. I think it could go either way. I mean, it's funny. We normally interview players on Thursdays, and all I know is that if I'm inside Moncrief right now, my advice to the coach would be, well, you need to make some players available on Thursday, because if you don't, then it's going to really look like you really are panicked. That's the only way to make this. If you don't like this story, you got to change the story, and to do that, you roll some more players out there, and you just and of course, a lot of people are going to coach those players up not to say anything about it, because that's just kind of what they do now. But you just move it aside and put on. But the fact remains that Moro Ojomo has shined a light on the fact that a veteran leader on this team still thinks that there are maybe too many players for his liking that are not fully invested in winning, right? And to me, that's the goal. Sark has to find those people and either weed them out or get them to get on board.
When he said something about maybe you should also make sure you've mowed your own yard, or you've taken care of your own backyard, or whatever, your own business, was he talking about Ojomo, or was he just talking about everybody?
Well, I definitely interpreted that as Ojomo, for sure. I mean, that could very easily be interpreted as, your own position grouping, for sure. But at the same time, just a few minutes prior, he said that Saturday spring scrimmage was the defensive line played really well and they had trouble running the ball. So, it sounds to me like they were doing it. I mean, that's the thing about stats. You'd love it if Moro was a guy who was like an all-world, type of player. Statistically speaking, he's not, right? But he does have, 5 years under his belt and 25 starts or whatever. And defensive tackles are hard to pile up a bunch of stats. But he is a key contributor. There's no question about it. And when he talks, people listen in the locker room. There's no doubt.
So outside of all that, how's everything else going there, Brian? I mean, they've got a quarterback battle. They got Quinn Ewers, who's apparently already worth like $80 million, if you believe the internet, and all these things going on. So how is that stuff actually going on the field?
Well, okay. Well, first off, it's $100 million. Don't fool them, okay? Don't show them anything. The reports that I've gotten from my super secret spies who have watched practice, it's about what you'd expect. Some days he looks great. Some days he looks like a freshman. And again, all of this is against air, right? My whole thing is this. You can be a 5-star, all-world everything. Okay, that's all great. But what happens in week 2 when an Alabama defense is coming at you with a 300-pounder who was a 5-star player as well, right? I mean, what happens then? Because we saw what happened last year, all right? I thought Stark would pick Casey Thompson to start the year. He didn't. He picked Hudson Card, and they went to Arkansas, and the guy froze. He simply was not ready for that environment and that defense. And so, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big believer in the sort of if you got the number one draft pick, if you draft the number one guy, you put him in the lineup and go, right. I don't know if this is that same equivalent, but I find it very, very difficult to believe that Quinn Ewers transferred here from Ohio State thinking he was going to be in a quarterback battle and ride the bench.
Right. Yeah.
With a guy that had lost his job.
Correct. Against a guy who had lost his job.
Yeah.
So the NIL stuff was talked about to death with Ewers, and I think at this point everybody's pretty on board with the whole thing. It's just, maybe some rules in place that were a little bit, clear or whatever. But, I go back to Ojomo's comments and talking about guys just want to make money and kiss girls and drink and all that stuff. How do you think the whole NIL aspect of college football has had an impact on Texas? And is that a concern? Because they're one of the big spenders that – yeah, you do want the stars, but you also, might, because you're just paying money to bring them in, be bringing in guys who are exactly who Moro Ojomo's talking about.
Well, I really do think that NIL is a double-edged sword. I personally think it's great that these players are finally getting paid their worth and their value for name, image, and likeness. I think that's awesome, right? But at the same time, you cannot dismiss the fact that only a small amount of the locker room is going to make big money while everybody else makes either, peanut shells or nothing, right? This isn't pro football. And, pro football, people understand that, the quarterback and the left tackle and the rush in make all the money. They get that, right? But in college football, I don't know. It's just hard for me to see. I only want to speak about Texas here for a second, but people can understand that Bijan Robinson would have a bunch of NIL deals.
Yeah.
Right. That's totally understandable. But for Quinn Ewers to have maybe even more money in NIL and all that, I mean, that gets a big question mark over my head. It's what's this guy done to earn all that? Right now, the answer is nothing, And so that to me is where the market seems like it needs to kind of figure itself out, because guys are clearly getting paid off of potential when they really haven't done anything yet.
I wish we could all get paid off potential.
I want to be paid off potential.
I have so much untapped potential.
We just have, Brian. We have Mac Rhodes almost every Tuesday, and he mentioned that as well. He's not against all of what's going on. It's just that, that he's a little bit concerned, as most ADs would be, or even coaches would be. It sounds great if you're a fan or a booster or a T-shirt fan or an alum of a school that they're getting some of these guys in because of it. But there's also there's some landmines here. And
well, here's the thing too, Smoak. I mean, what happens when some boosters pay for a guy and it just doesn't work out, right? Like the guy gets hurt, or the guy just wasn't as good as everybody hoped, or whatnot. And then a couple years down the road, the coach who is sort of banking on these boosters to foot the bill, all of a sudden they turn off the financial spigot, and now the coach X can't get those recruits, and now he's up the creek, right? I mean, it seems to me that there's just a lot of, as this thing goes on, as we go on this thing year by year, people are going to get smarter, and the market is going to be more established in terms of value and what people will and won't pay for. And I'm just telling you, if I'm a coach, man, I hope your program is good, because if it's bad, I think you're going to struggle with NIL.
Brian, you want?
Yeah, I did want to ask. I mean, obviously, Brian, we'll have you on closer to the season and whatnot, but have you felt any sort of buzz with the influx of the transfers they brought in? And in particular, a guy I watched a lot of who I saw Texas get, and I was like, dang, that's a good one, was Isaiah Nayor. Anything to report back on him?
No, he is definitely someone who has already Sark has definitely brought him up a couple of times for sure. He's probably somebody that's going to be opposite Xavier Worthy on the field. Look, it's no secret Texas needs more explosive plays, and he absolutely did that at Wyoming last year. So there's a lot of hope for him, and I really think that Isaiah, Xavier Worthy, and a healthy Jordan Whittington. I mean, I think that's a trio that any Big 12 team would take.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good threesome. they have a couple other guys that are dinged up. They'd really like to get Troy O'Meara going. He's been plagued the last 2 years with injuries and whatnot. But we'll see. To me, I mean, can they? But here's the problem, though. They have all these great wideouts, but can they block the 300-pounder coming off the edge? And can the quarterback complete the pass to get to the thing here? So that's it.
Hey, man. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, real quick, before we go here, because I'm on with you guys, guess what I got in the mail today? Yeah, you'll never guess what I got in the mail. I am looking at the wonderful, beautiful face of one Scott Drew. The road to joy has just landed on my inbox. Thank you, UPS man, with a wonderful note here from Scott Drew. I know that he signed this just for me. Not really, but very excited to read our man's new book here because I'm sure it's really good.
You know what? That's awesome, and that probably is from him. I mean,
knowing him, actually, it probably is.
Yeah, Brian, save it for a day like where you wake up in the morning and you're like, man, I
don't feel good today. I'm kind of blah.
It's gloomy, and then just read the first couple pages, and
you'll want to go run around Lake Austin or whatever it is. LBJ.
There you go. That'd be great.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Hey, good stuff, man. Thank you as always, Brian. Appreciate the insight.
Appreciate it, guys.
Austin American-Statesman Brian Davis. A little bit about Ojomo and the comments we had in the opening segment.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to, kind of wrap my head around having partial information because we didn't know anything about Ojomo's comments last week, and then all of a sudden Sark talks today, and if you're not in Austin, I don't know why you would have been paying attention to it. And it wasn't even a big deal what he said last week until today.
There you go.
So, the comments were harmless until Sark commented on them, so that's his bad, quite frankly, unless, it's just he had to, but... I still don't think it's something that's, indicative necessarily of like a terrible culture or things like that. I'm expecting Texas to be pretty good this year, but it does make me wonder, and especially hearing some more while I was at practice, I was reading some more of the quotes and more of what he was getting into, more of what Ojomo said, where he was calling some guys out. But, I think it's going to be handled in-house and be fine, but it is something, if you don't handle it right, then it turns into what it turns into, and that's a tough lesson for Sark to learn because now you got this drama for no real reason that could have been handled and not been a media thing, but it's not a killer of the season by any means. It's something they'll get over and be fine, but I do wonder, it does make me wonder more about the NIL aspect of when you are – willing to pay an offensive lineman $50,000. And I go back to that one all the time, and I know there's others like it, but that's the one that was just so blatantly obvious. Like, that was the one that just sent, okay, NIL's off the rails now, in my opinion. And I know there were similar ones, but when you do have that going on, are you surprised if maybe the culture's not going to be to where everybody's coming in bootstraps ready to go and they're making $50,000 for being on the team? Like, of course there's guys probably thinking about how they're going to spend that money on 6th Street, and I know 6th Street's not even that popular, but you know what I'm saying.
Anywhere in Austin.
8th Street where it's at.
Yeah.
14th Street.
But you know what I mean? Like, I mean, of course that's going to be a distraction of some sort, or could potentially be. So I do wonder, it's one thing to throw that money out there, but that doesn't mean that once you cut that check that those guys are going to be totally focused on the job at hand and not distracted by things.
Mac Roach today, Craig, when you were gone, said that there were a couple of players at Baylor that were in NIL deals that did not, I don't think he said underperformed, but probably did not meet expectations.
Yeah, and the thing that,
and they were on campus.
Yeah, that is upside down to me, and we've talked about this several times today, is in professional life. Whatever your job is, but in professional sports, which is the model they're trying to compare it to, when you pay for something, you know exactly what you're getting. But I think a lot of these people willing to pay for NIL don't quite understand how sports works in that, look, there's a jump. Like, you can be a great high school player and then be an average college football player or not at all.
Ever play
and then you're paying $50,000 a year for this guy who may never crack the starting lineup. When do you, like Brian said, when do you go, well, I'm not paying for this
What
anymore.
about the walk-on, or what about the guy that didn't get it? This is starting left guard.
I think about, imagine if Garrett Gilbert was around the NIL era. Imagine how much he would have commanded and how much. And then, Jarrett Stidham at Baylor, if he was in the NIL era, and could have just been, and then what did he turn into? Obviously that went sideways, so thankfully that wasn't around back then. But, yeah, it's not an anti-NIL thing. I am curious to see if you do see with more big money being thrown around, and if there is a culture that's a little bit touchy, then maybe that does turn into something. But I saw somebody post, Sarkisian's the one that escalated this.
Ray Grange, who's been a part of athletics and all of that business. This wouldn't have been a story without Sarkisian escalating it.
And without it being Texas.
Brian Davis just basically said that.
Yeah.
Is that he didn't even use that in any way. It was going to be a part of a spring summary. And then, 100%. Go talk to the players. And they talk to the players. The player says something. Wait a minute. You're not allowed.
Right,
he can't
right.
talk. But, okay. We have to move on.